Question 616. Joe, who has not yet obtained his real estate license, is an employee of a real estate brokerage. While studying for the real estate exam, he can legally perform the following agency-related activities, except A. Search the MLS for new listings, B. Create a brochure for an open house, C. Keep client records organized, D. Show properties to prospective clients. Correct answer is D. Show properties to prospective clients. California and most jurisdictions mandate a real estate license for activities directly aiding buyers or sellers in property transactions, particularly those requiring judgment and negotiation. This licensing ensures that individuals involved in these key aspects of real estate have the necessary knowledge and authorization. Showing properties is considered a core activity that requires a license because it involves 1. Interpreting property features and answering questions. This requires knowledge of real estate principles and the ability to represent the property accurately. 2. Influencing a buyer's decision. The way a property is shown and the information provided can significantly impact a prospective buyer. 3. Acting as a representative of the brokerage and potentially the seller. This requires the legal authority granted by a real estate license. Therefore, the act of showing properties to prospective clients directly engages in real estate brokerage activities that require a license, making it the exception. Question 617. The duties of a property manager include A. Creating and operating budget, B. Collecting rent, C. Conducting evictions, D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. Property managers are often responsible for developing and managing the financial aspects of the property, including creating a budget for income and expenses. A core function of property management is to collect rent payments from tenants in a timely manner. When necessary and legally permissible, property managers handle the process of evicting tenants who violate the lease agreement. These are all common and essential responsibilities of a property manager in San Jose, California, and elsewhere. They act as the landlord's agent in overseeing the day-to-day operations and financial performance of the property. Question 618. For a lease to be properly recorded into the country recorder's office, the lessor must A. Have the lessee sign the lease, B. Acknowledge the lease, C. Notarize the lease, D. File the lease in triplicate. Correct answer is B. Acknowledge the lease. While the lessee's signature is essential for the lease to be a valid contract between the parties, it's the lessor's acknowledgement that is typically required for recording purposes. The recording provides public notice of the lessor's conveyance of an interest. There is generally no requirement to file a lease in triplicate with the county recorder. Typically, the original document, or a certified copy, is recorded. Notarize is often used interchangeably with acknowledge, as the notary public performs the act of taking the acknowledgement. So, option B and C are very closely related, but acknowledge is the more precise legal term for what the lessor must do. Acknowledgement is a formal declaration before a notary public or other authorized official by the person who executed the document that they did so freely and voluntarily, in this case, typically the lessor, as they are conveying an interest. This provides evidence of the genuineness of the signature. Question 619. Mary wants to erect a 10-foot wall around her home to keep out intruders. Before construction starts, she should find out if this would violate A. Zoning laws, B. Restrictions, C. Both A and BD building codes. Correct answer is C. Both A and B. Local zoning ordinances in San Jose, and most cities, regulate various aspects of land use, including the height and placement of fences and walls. These laws are in place to maintain neighborhood aesthetics, ensure public safety, and control development. A 10-foot wall might exceed allowable height limits for fences in certain residential zones or have setback requirements from property lines. Mary's property might be subject to private restrictions, often called covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs. Especially if her home is part of a homeowners association, WA, or a planned development in San Jose. These restrictions can be more stringent than zoning laws and might regulate the height, materials, and style of fences and walls to maintain community standards. While building codes primarily focus on the structural integrity and safety of buildings, they might also have some regulations related to the construction of walls, particularly if they are load-bearing or exceed certain heights. However, zoning laws and private restrictions are more directly concerned with the height and placement of boundary walls for aesthetic and land use purposes. Therefore, to ensure compliance, Mary needs to check both the zoning laws of San Jose and any private restrictions, CC&Rs, that apply to her property. Question 620. Owner Oliver was given an offer by purchaser Paul to buy his condominium apartment. In the written offer, Paul specified that Oliver had a deadline of 2 weeks to consider it. 20 days later, after a competing offer fell through, Oliver accepted Paul's offer, which the listing broker communicated to Paul. The contract between the parties is A. Not binding, because the offer automatically expired after the 2-week deadline elapsed. B. Binding, because there has been a mutual meeting of minds. C. Binding, because Paul did not verbally revoke his offer. D. Not binding, because Oliver's late acceptance created a counter-offer that now must be accepted or rejected by Paul. Correct answer is A. Not binding, because the offer automatically expired after the 2-week deadline elapsed. Purchaser Paul clearly stated a 2-week deadline for Oliver to accept his offer. This created a time limit within which Oliver had to communicate his acceptance to form a binding contract. Once the specified deadline passed without acceptance being communicated, Paul's original offer automatically expired by its own terms. An expired offer cannot be accepted to create a valid contract. Oliver's acceptance 20 days later, after the offer had already expired, does not create a binding contract. Instead, Oliver's acceptance is legally considered a counter-offer. This counter-offer proposes new terms, acceptance after the deadline, that Paul is now free to either accept or reject. Question 621. Option contracts will be binding on the optioner if A. As mutually agreed on consideration between the parties, pool cleaning services worth $100 are provided by the optionee to the optioner. B. The parties agree to consideration of $5,000 in cash, but it is never delivered to the optioner. C. The object of the contract is the construction of an illegal meth lab. D. None of the above. Correct answer is A. As mutually agreed on consideration between the parties, pool cleaning services worth $100 are provided by the optionee to the optioner. An option contract, to be binding and enforceable, requires valid consideration. Consideration is something of value exchanged between the parties to create a binding agreement. It can be money, goods, services, or even a promise. A. As mutually agreed on consideration between the parties, pool cleaning services worth $100 are provided by the optionee to the optioner. In this scenario, the optionee has provided a service, pool cleaning, that the optioner agreed had a value of $100. This constitutes valid consideration, making the option contract binding on the optioner, to keep the offer open for the specified period. B. The parties agree to consideration of $5,000 in cash, but it is never delivered to the optioner. An agreement to provide consideration is not the same as actually providing it. If the $5,000 is never delivered, there is a lack of actual consideration, and the option contract would likely not be binding on the optioner. A mere promise to pay in the future might be sufficient in some contract scenarios, but for an option contract, the consideration is typically required up front to make the option binding. C. The object of the contract is the construction of an illegal meth lab. A contract with an illegal purpose is void and unenforceable from its inception. The law will not uphold agreements that violate statutes or public policy. Therefore, this option contract would not be binding. Therefore, option A presents a scenario where valid consideration has been provided, making the option contract binding. The presence of mutually agreed upon and provided consideration is essential for an option contract to be binding on the optioner. Question 622. Regarding the relationship between a broker and her salesperson, the broker is an employer and the salesperson is an A. Independent contractor, B. Special agent, C. Employee, D. Either A or C. Correct answer is D. Either A or C. In California, a real estate salesperson can work for a broker as either A. An independent contractor. In this arrangement, the salesperson typically has more control over their work schedule, methods, and expenses. They usually receive a commission-based compensation and are responsible for their own taxes and benefits. The broker provides general oversight but has less direct control over the day-to-day activities of the salesperson. C. An employee. In this arrangement, the broker has more control over the salesperson's work hours, duties, and methods. The salesperson may receive a salary, commission, or a combination of both, and the broker may be responsible for withholding taxes and providing benefits. The specific nature of the relationship is determined by the written agreement between the broker and the salesperson, as well as the actual practices of their working relationship. Factors considered include the level of control the broker has over the salesperson, how the salesperson is compensated, and whether the broker provides benefits. Therefore, depending on the specific agreement and working relationship, a real estate salesperson can be classified as either an independent contractor or an employee of the broker. Question 623. The California real estate law is included in a section of the state's regulations code called the A. California Code of Regulations for Business, B. Business and Professions Code, C. Administrative Law Guide for Professionals, D. Ethical Conduct Code. Correct answer is B. Business and Professions Code. Specifically, the laws governing real estate brokers and salespeople in California are primarily found in Division 4, Part 1, of the California Business and Professions Code, which is administered by the California Department of Real Estate, DRE. The Business and Professions Code sections 10,000 to 10,580 contain the Real Estate Law of California, aka the License Law. Along with the Real Estate Commissioner's regulations, the license law regulates the profession and protects the public from incompetent, immoral, or fraudulent real estate agents. Question 624. The top salesperson at a real estate agency informs his broker that he is leaving the agency and going to work for another broker. His current broker should A. Contact the other broker and threaten to report him to the authorities for stealing his salesperson. B. Return the license certificate to the salesperson. C. Not return the license certificate to the salesperson until he has made at least one more sale as compensation for the departure. D. Return the license certificate to the salesperson and immediately notify the real estate commissioner of his departure. Correct answer is D. Return the license certificate to the salesperson and immediately notify the real estate commissioner of his departure. Salespeople are free to change their employment. Attempting to interfere with this is inappropriate and likely unethical and potentially illegal. There's no legal basis for reporting the other broker for hiring the salesperson. This is illegal and unethical. The broker cannot hold the salesperson's license as leverage for compensation beyond what has already been agreed upon for past services. The salesperson is entitled to have their license returned promptly upon termination of the employment relationship. The salesperson's real estate license is issued to them, but it is held by the employing broker. When a salesperson leaves, the broker is obligated to return the physical license certificate to the salesperson. California real estate law requires the employing broker to promptly notify the Department of Real Estate, DRE, when a salesperson leaves their employment within 5 days. This ensures that the DRE's records are accurate regarding which broker the salesperson is associated with. Question 625. Warhol promises to pay Wyeth $2,000 if Wyeth paints Warhol's house. Midway through the job, the house is destroyed in an earthquake. If Wyeth sues Warhol for payment, Wyeth will likely A. Win, according to the legal doctrine of restitution, B. Win, according to the legal doctrine of reliance, C. Lose, because it is not Warhol's fault that the house was destroyed, D. Lose, because the subject of the painting contract the house has been destroyed. Correct answer is A. Win, according to the legal doctrine of restitution. The destruction of the house by the earthquake makes it impossible for Wyeth to complete the painting job. This generally discharges both parties from their remaining contractual obligations. The doctrine of restitution allows a party who has partially performed under a contract that is subsequently discharged due to impossibility to recover the reasonable value of the services they have already rendered. Wyeth has put in work painting the house before the unforeseen event occurred. Fault is not the primary factor in impossibility of performance. Even if neither party is at fault for the event that makes performance impossible, the contract is generally discharged. However, Wyeth is still entitled to compensation for the work already done. While the destruction of the house does discharge the contract, it doesn't necessarily mean Wyeth loses the right to any payment for the work completed. The doctrine of restitution addresses this situation by allowing recovery for partial performance. Therefore, under the legal doctrine of restitution, Wyeth can likely recover the reasonable value of the painting services he provided before the earthquake destroyed the house.